Another game I loved recently was Pentiment, which I realize now I played last summer. It's weird how time is flying by uh, like a flag. Um, and yeah, I love Pentiment. It's kind of gotten me into this weird subgenre of like monastery mysteries, which is a whole thing apparently. Um, I really like Brother Cadfael or however you say it. I'm gonna keep reading those. Um, anyways, I feel like an underrated part of Pentiment um, was the mini games. In a vacuum, uh, they were kind of bare. Whether you're just pressing a button to spin a piece of fabric or cutting cookies or whatever, by themselves, they weren't very interesting. But combined with learning about the time period, combined with being kind of plunged into the narrative, combined with learning and speaking to other characters as you kind of do these simple menial actions, um, there's something so rewarding, almost like ASMR about it. Um, Especially when it's something like as comforting as like watching a blade pierce through cookie dough. Um, I just it was it added these much needed periods of relaxation to like three consecutive murder mysteries, which I won't spoil. Um, and I guess for Pentiment, the challenge was more on the side of the mini games. It's not making the mini games too interesting to the extent that the player wouldn't be paying attention to the narrative, to the characters, to the things they're supposed to be learning about the world. Um, there's a skill to that, and it's difficult to pull off. And I think Pentiment did it really well. A game that kind of does that on the other end that I like that I just played finally is Thomas Was Alone. This is, of course, a much simpler game, 100 levels of guiding sentient rectangles through little spaces that want to kill them, with a narrator ascribing hilarious personalities onto the little squares and rectangles. Um, that, without the voiceover would just be squares and rectangles. I think the challenge for Thomas Was Alone was on the opposite end of the spectrum, where the goal was ultimately to tell a simple story with wider stretching AI themes in the popular consciousness, but ultimately a simple story while the player's fixation should be on the puzzles. Um, Now, the story couldn't be too all-encompassing, else the players not pay attention to the object of the game. And so the narration is relegated to the beginning of levels generally, um, and the characters can't be too complex. And I think for the most part, Thomas pulls this off really well. Um, might get a might falter a bit in the self-aware plan sequel that was kind of just mashed under the end, which you even get an achievement for called Electric Boogaloo. It's nice and self-aware and perhaps not as strong as when you're dealing with the original rectangles and squares. Um, but I guess the point is there's a real skill to telling a story that's willing to keep itself in the background, um, that's willing to be behind even simple mechanics, often simple puzzles featured in Thomas Was Alone. And yeah, like I think for the most part, it accomplishes it really well. Um, in my Steam review, which a lot of these videos are actually just like YouTube adaptations of, um, which was not the original intent of this channel, but I guess it's the kind of content I can pump out a little easier, and these videos I do like making. Um, the kind of more controversial thing I wrote was that I think like a compelling story can almost erase like faults in base mechanics if it's just compelling enough to draw your attention away, but not so compelling to the extent that I wouldn't pay attention to it at all and rather focus on the flawed mechanics. And I think for like until you get to the final act, Thomas pulls that off like really faultlessly. Um, like you have a narrative that's simple and not perfect but compelling, and you have a puzzle game that has some cool ideas but um, like definitely isn't ahead like at the top of its class, but somehow these elements come together where like the experience I got, I wasn't focusing so much on the imperfections. And I don't know how objective that is. Like maybe other people were more annoyed by sometimes the repetitiveness of some of the puzzles, sometimes the plain, when I look at it objectively, like not great design, where actions can become like very repetitive, and like sometimes a lot of the time consumed on the puzzles all about um is all about like what order you accidentally did it in. Um, but like I found myself just incapable of caring about that. And I don't know if you can consistently write games like this. And the kinds of games it's most similar to is like stuff on the App Store. Um, if there's other stuff like that, you should tell me about in the comments. Um, but yeah, I guess the point is there's like a kind of writing you can do in a game, in my experience, that can kind of make the experience all about itself rather than the game around it. And I think that's cool.